The dust swirled in the late afternoon sun as Jessie Wilson stepped down from the stage coach, her knuckles white from gripping the leather satchel that contained everything she owned in this world. Leadville, Colorado wasn't much to look at, just another mining town carved into the mountainside, but to Jessie, it represented something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "Last stop, madam," the driver called down, tossing her trunk to the ground with a thud that matched the pounding in her chest. "Welcome to Leadville." She nodded her thanks, scanning the bustling main street. Silver had made this town, transformed it from a whisper to a shout in the span of a few short years. Now, in 1880, Leadville stood proud as one of the largest silver camps in the country. Men in work clothes mingled with dandies in fine suits. Women in calico hurried past others draped in silks. Opportunity hung in the air, as tangible as the scent of pine and dust. "Miss Wilson?" A reedy voice caught her attention. "Miss Jessie Wilson." Jessie turned to see a slight man with spectacles and a bowler hat approaching. "Yes, that's me." "Herbert Collins, madam." He extended his hand. "I handle affairs for the Silver Dollar Saloon. Mrs. Parker received your letter about the position." Jessie straightened her shoulders and hoped the weariness of 3 days' travel didn't show on her face. At 25, she'd learned that first impressions mattered, especially when you were a woman alone. "Yes, I'm here about the singing position." "Excellent, excellent." Mr. Collins picked up her trunk without another word and began walking. "Mrs. Parker is expecting you." The establishment provides room and board upstairs for its performers. Jessie followed, taking in the wooden sidewalks and the grand false fronts of the buildings. Some towns tried to hide their roughness. Leadville wore it proudly. The air was thin up here, over 10,000 feet above sea level, and Jessie found herself breathing harder than usual. The Silver Dollar Saloon stood 3 stories tall, its painted facade gleaming with fresh paint. Inside, the afternoon crowd was sparse: a few miners at tables, a gentleman at the bar, and a bored-looking barkeep polishing glasses. "Mrs. Parker, the new singer has arrived," Collins announced. A handsome woman in her 50s emerged from a back room. She had steel gray hair piled atop her head and appraising eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Wilson, you're younger than I expected." "But no less experienced, Mrs. Parker," Jessie replied steadily. "I've been performing since I was 16. The older woman's expression softened slightly. "We'll see about that tonight, won't we? Collins will show you to your room. You'll have time to rest before your debut. We start at 8 sharp." Jessie nodded. "Thank you for the opportunity." The room was small but clean: a narrow bed, a washstand, a mirror, and a window overlooking the alley. After Collins left, Jessie sank onto the bed, allowing herself a moment of doubt. She'd come here running from memories, from a life that had crumbled beneath her feet in Denver after her father's debts had caught up with them. After his death, the creditors had taken everything, leaving her with nothing but her voice and the determination to make her own way. She unpacked her few possessions, carefully hanging up her 2 performance dresses. The blue one would do for tonight; it showed less wear than the green. She splashed water on her face, pinned up her chestnut hair, and tried to quiet the nervousness in her stomach. By 8 o'clock, the Silver Dollar was packed with miners fresh off shift, businessmen seeking entertainment, and locals looking for a night's diversion. The small stage at the back of the room felt 1,000 miles away as Jessie made her way through the crowd. Mrs. Parker caught her arm. "Just 3 songs to start. If they like you, we'll do more." Her eyes softened slightly. "Don't mind them if they're rough around the edges. They work hard for their silver, they just want something pretty to look at and listen to." Jessie nodded, smoothing the front of her blue dress. The pianist, an elderly man with kind eyes, nodded to her as she approached. "What'll it be, miss?" he asked. "Beautiful Dreamer to start," she replied. "Then Lorna and Shenandoah." He nodded approval at her choices and began the introduction. Jessie took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The crowd quieted somewhat as she began to sing, her clear soprano filling the smoky room. She kept her eyes fixed on a spot on the back wall, not daring to look at individual faces yet. By the second verse, the conversations had dimmed further, and by the final notes, the room had fallen into an attentive hush. She moved into Lorna, a a Civil War ballad that never failed to touch hearts, especially those old enough to remember the conflict. When she finished, the applause was genuine. Emboldened, she finally let her gaze sweep across the room. That was when she first saw him standing by the door. Unlike the other men, he wasn't clapping. He simply watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore the practical clothes of a rancher, a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, jeans, and boots that had seen many miles. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could see he wore a neatly trimmed beard flecked with gray. Jessie forced her attention back to the crowd at large and nodded to the pianist for her final song. As the melancholy notes of Shenandoah filled the room, the stranger by the door moved to the bar, but she could feel his eyes on her still. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Mrs. Parker appeared at her side, smiling for the first time. "You'll do, Miss Wilson. You'll do very nicely. Give them 2 more before you take a break." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Jessie sang until her throat was dry, each song met with growing appreciation. The stranger remained at the bar, nursing a single whiskey, his attention never wavering. It unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. During her final break, Mrs. Parker pressed a glass of water into her hand. "You've made quite an impression for your first night," she said, nodding toward the crowded room. "Especially on Matthew Tucker over there." Jessie followed her gaze to the stranger at the bar. "The man in the leather vest, the very same, owns the largest cattle ranch this side of South Park, widowed these past 5 years, doesn't come to town much, certainly not to the Silver Dollar." Mrs. Parker's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Yet here he is, sat through your entire performance." Before Jessie could respond, Mrs. Parker was called away by the barkeep. Jessie sipped her water, trying not to look too obviously at Matthew Tucker. She'd come to Leadville for a fresh start, not to catch the eye of a rancher, no matter how intriguing he might be. When she took the stage for her final set, she found herself singing Barbara Allen directly to him, the tale of love and regret flowing from her lips as naturally as breathing. His expression remained unreadable, but he tipped his hat to her when she finished, a gesture so subtle it might have been meant for someone else entirely. As the night wound down, Jessie helped the barmaids clear glasses from the tables, despite their protests that it wasn't her job. She'd always believed in pulling her weight, regardless of her position. She was gathering a tray of empty glasses when a shadow fell across the table. "Miss Wilson." She looked up into the face of Matthew Tucker. Up close, she could see his eyes were a deep blue, the kind that reminded her of mountain lakes. Lines etched from sun and weather spoke of a life lived outdoors. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about his weathered features. "Mr. Tucker," she acknowledged, continuing her work. "You have a fine voice," he said. His own was deep and resonant with a hint of the South in it. "Thank you." She straightened, balancing the tray of glasses. "I haven't heard singing like that since." He paused, something flickering in his eyes. "It's been a long while. I'm glad you enjoyed it." She wasn't sure why she felt so flustered under his gaze. He nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "My ranch is hosting a gathering Saturday next. Neighbors, hands, their families. Would be honored if you'd come sing for us. I'd pay you fair." The offer surprised her. "That's very kind, but I've only just started here. I'm not sure Mrs. Parker would." "I've already spoken with her," he interrupted. "She says it's your decision." Jessie hesitated. She needed the money, that much was certain, and it would be a chance to see more of Colorado than just the inside of a saloon. "I'd be happy to perform for your gathering, Mr. Tucker," she finally said. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'll send a wagon for you Saturday morning." He touched the brim of his hat. "Good evening, Miss Wilson." She watched him leave, his tall figure cutting through the thinning crowd with ease. There was something about him, a quiet dignity, perhaps, or the weight of experiences carried in the set of his shoulders. "Well now, Mrs." Parker's voice came from behind her, amused. "Barely one night in town and you've caught the eye of the most eligible widower in Lake County." Jessie set down the tray of glasses. "It's just a singing engagement." "Of course it is, dear." Mrs. Parker patted her arm. "Just be careful." Matthew Tucker's a good man, but he's had his share of sorrow, lost his wife to fever back in '75, has a boy, too, about 12 now, I think. I'm not looking for complications, Mrs. Parker, Jessie said firmly, just a fresh start. The older woman's smile was knowing. Life is complications, dear, especially out here. Now get some rest, you've earned it. That night, Jessie lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of Leadville settling into darkness. The thin mountain air made the stars seem closer somehow, their light filtering through her small window. She thought of Matthew Tucker's intense gaze, of the story his face told without words. She'd come to Leadville to escape her past, not to tangle herself in someone else's. Yet something about the quiet rancher called to her, a silent recognition she couldn't explain. Exhaustion finally claimed her, and she fell asleep to the distant sound of a piano from the saloon below, still playing long after the last customer had gone. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp. Jessie had spent the week settling into life at the Silver Dollar, her performances drawing increasingly larger crowds. Mrs. Parker was pleased, and Jessie felt herself beginning to relax into the rhythm of her new life. But the prospect of visiting the Tucker Ranch had remained in the back of her mind, a curiosity she couldn't quite shake. True to his word, Matthew Tucker sent a wagon. To Jessie's surprise, the driver was not a ranch hand but a boy on the cusp of manhood, with his father's blue eyes and a serious expression that seemed too old for his young face. "Miss Wilson," he called up to her window. "I'm Michael Tucker. Pa sent me to fetch you." Jessie hurried down to meet him, clutching her small bag with a change of clothes and her sheet music. "It's nice to meet you, Michael. That's very kind of you to come all this way." He helped her up onto the wagon seat with a politeness that spoke of good raising. "It's no trouble, madam. Pa says it's never a burden to help a lady." As they pulled away from the bustle of Leadville, Jessie studied the boy from the corner of her eye. He handled the team with confident ease, his slender hands steady on the reins. There was a guardedness about him, a careful measuring in his gaze that reminded her powerfully of his father. "Your father mentioned a gathering," she said, breaking the silence. "Is it a special occasion?" Michael kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "End of spring branding." "Pa always has folks over to celebrate, says it's important to remember we're part of something bigger than just our own spread." "That's a good philosophy," Jessie replied. The boy nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Ma used to say the same thing before she passed." Jessie's heart twisted. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you, madam." His response was automatic, the words of a child who had heard the same sentiment many times. It was a long time ago. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable quiet, broken only by the creak of the wagon and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. The landscape opened up around them, the mountains rising majestically in the distance, meadows bright with early summer wildflowers. "It's beautiful out here," Jessie murmured, more to herself than to Michael. "Pa says there's no place on earth closer to heaven." A small smile tugged at the boy's lips. "Except maybe Texas, but he's partial on account of being born there." "And what do you think?" she asked. Michael considered the question seriously. "I think home is wherever the people you care about are." He glanced at her quickly, then away. "Ma used to say that too." They crested a hill, and the Tucker Ranch spread out before them, a sturdy two-story house of weathered wood and stone, a large barn, corrals, and outbuildings, all nestled in a valley with a creek winding through it. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and horses grazed in a pasture near the house. "Tucker's Rest," Michael announced with quiet pride. "Pa's grandfather started it. Pa's built it up since he came back from the war." "It's magnificent," Jessie said sincerely. "Your father must work very hard." "Hardest working man I know," Michael agreed, guiding the wagon down the hill toward the ranch house. "Says honest work keeps a man right with the world." People were already gathering in the yard as they approached ranch hands and their families, neighbors who had ridden in from miles around. A long table had been set up beneath a stand of cottonwood trees, loaded with food. Someone was tuning a fiddle, and children darted about in excited play. Matthew Tucker appeared from the direction of the barn as they pulled up. He looked different here on his own land, more at ease, the weight he carried less evident. He helped Jessie down from the wagon, his hand warm and calloused around hers. "Miss Wilson, thank you for coming." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I hope the journey wasn't too taxing." "Not at all," she assured him. "Your son is an excellent driver and guide." Something like pride flickered in Matthew's expression as he glanced at Michael. "He's a good boy, takes after his mother that way." He turned back to Jessie. "Come, I'll introduce you around. Most folks here haven't had the pleasure of hearing you sing yet." The afternoon unfolded in a warmth Jessie hadn't experienced in years. The Tucker Ranch hands welcomed her with shy courtesy, their wives with open curiosity. Children gathered around her when word spread that she was a singer from the city, peppering her with questions about Denver and her life before Leadville. Through it all, she was aware of Matthew Tucker's presence, helping an older neighbor to a seat, laughing with his foreman, ruffling his son's hair as he passed. He moved through his world with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his place in it. When it came time for her to sing, Matthew had prepared a small stage area, really just a platform of wooden pallets, but decorated with wildflowers and ribbons in a touching attempt at elegance. A ranch hand who played the fiddle accompanied her, and Jessie sang all the old favorites, Sweet Betsy from Pike, Red River Valley. "Oh Susanna," songs that spoke of the frontier spirit of love and loss and perseverance. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, she noticed Matthew standing apart from the crowd, watching her with that same intense gaze she'd first seen in the Silver Dollar. Michael stood beside him, the resemblance between father and son striking in the golden light. After her performance, as people began to drift toward the food tables again, Jessie found herself approached by the pair. "That was real fine singing, Miss Wilson," Michael said, his usual reserve softened by genuine admiration. "Especially Ora Lee, that was my ma's favorite." "Thank you, Michael," Jessie replied, touched by the boy's earnestness. "It's one of my favorites, too." Matthew placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael, why don't you go help Mrs. Hodges with serving the pie? I believe she was asking for you." The boy nodded, glancing between the adults with a knowing look beyond his years before heading toward the food tables. Matthew watched him go, his expression softening. "He doesn't open up to people easily, not since his mother passed. You've made quite an impression." "He's a remarkable young man," Jessie said. "You've raised him well." "I've done my best." Matthew's gaze returned to her, assessing. "It's not easy raising a child alone out here." "I can only imagine," she replied softly. He seemed about to say something more when they were interrupted by one of the ranch hands calling him away to settle a dispute about a horse race the men wanted to organize. Matthew excused himself with a reluctant nod. As the evening progressed, lanterns were lit and a space cleared for dancing. The fiddle player was joined by another hand with a harmonica and a third with a guitar. Jessie found herself swept into a Virginia reel, laughing as she was passed from partner to partner. When the music slowed, Matthew appeared before her, hat in hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Wilson?" She placed her hand in his, aware of the eyes watching them. "I'd be honored, Mr. Tucker." His arm encircled her waist, keeping a respectful distance between them as they moved to the gentle rhythm of "The Girl I Left Behind Me." For a man who spent his days on horseback, he danced with surprising grace. "You've brought a lot of joy to these people today," he said, his voice low for her ears alone. "Been a while since there was this much laughter at Tucker's Rest." "They're good people," she replied. "It's easy to sing for folks who appreciate music." "And what about you, Miss Wilson?" he asked, his blue eyes studying her face. "What brings a voice like yours to a rough place like Leadville?" Jessie hesitated, the familiar weight of her past pressing down on her. "A fresh start," she finally said. "Isn't that what the West is supposed to offer?" Something in her tone must have warned him not to press further, for he simply nodded. "That it is, a place to begin again." They danced in silence for a moment, the space between them charged with unspoken questions. "Will you stay?" he asked finally. "In Leadville, I mean." "That depends," she answered honestly, "on whether I can make a life there, a real one, not just existence." Matthew's hand tightened slightly at her waist. Colorado has a way of growing on you, working its way into your bones until you can't imagine being anywhere else. Is that what happened to you? She asked, curious despite herself. A smile touched the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face. Something like that. Came out after the war with not much more than the clothes on my back and nightmares that wouldn't quit. Married Emma, took over the family ranch, found purpose again. His expression sobered. When she died, thought about leaving, taking Michael somewhere new, but this land, it holds you. The music ended before Jessie could respond. Matthew released her, stepping back with a small bow. Thank you for the dance, Miss Wilson. Please, she said impulsively, call me Jessie. His eyes warmed. Jessie then, and I'm Matthew. As the evening wore on, Jessie found herself sitting beside Michael on the porch steps, both taking a break from the festivities. The boy had a stick in his hands, idly drawing patterns in the dirt. Your pa mentioned your mother liked Ora Lee, Jessie said gently. Would you tell me about her? Only if you want to, of course. Michael was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, still looking at the ground, she was pretty. Not like you, her hair was yellow and she was real small, but pretty, and she laughed a lot. Pa says I don't remember right because I was only 7 when she died, but I do. He looked up at Jessie, his young face earnest. She smelled like lavender and bread, and when she laughed, it was like music. Jessie's heart ached for the boy, for the memories he clung to. She sounds wonderful. She was. Michael poked at the dirt with his stick. Pa doesn't talk about her much, think it hurts him too bad, but sometimes I catch him looking at her picture, the one on his bureau. He thinks I don't know. Grief is a strange thing, Jessie said softly. Sometimes the people we love most are the hardest to talk about when they're gone. You lost someone too? Michael asked, his perception startling her. Jessie nodded slowly. My father, not long ago. He wasn't perfect, but he was all the family I had. I'm sorry, Michael said simply. He hesitated, then added, when you sang tonight and you laughed at Mr. Hodges's joke before, you reminded me of her. My ma. Before Jessie could respond, Matthew approached, his expression curious at finding them deep in conversation. There you are, Michael. Mrs. Hodges is looking to head home. Thought you might like to say goodbye to Jimmy before they leave. Michael stood, brushing off his pants. Yes, sir. He glanced at Jessie, a flash of shyness returning. Thank you for talking with me, Miss Wilson. Anytime, Michael, she replied warmly. As the boy hurried off, Matthew took his place on the step beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. He likes you, Matthew said, his voice tinged with wonder. He doesn't take to people easily, especially women. He's a thoughtful boy, Jessie said. You should be proud. I am, every day. Matthew looked out at the gathering, now beginning to disperse as families with young children started the journey home. It hasn't been easy for him, growing up without a mother. No, I imagine not. Jessie followed his gaze. But he has you and this place and people who care about him. That counts for a great deal. Matthew turned to study her profile in the lantern light. You speak from experience? Jessie sighed, surprising herself with her willingness to share. My mother died when I was born. My father raised me alone. He wasn't always steady, but he loved me in his way. And now, he passed last winter, influenza. She didn't mention the debts, the creditors, the hasty flight from Denver. That's when I decided to come to Leadville, start fresh. Matthew was silent for a moment, digesting this. Then, I'm sorry for your loss. And I for yours, she replied softly. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sounds of the night crickets beginning their evening chorus, the distant lowing of cattle, laughter from the remaining guests. It's growing late, Matthew said finally. The guests will be leaving soon. I've had a room prepared for you in the house, unless you'd prefer to return to town tonight. The thought of the jolting wagon ride back to Leadville in the dark held little appeal. That's very kind of you. If it's not an imposition, I'd be grateful to stay. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. No imposition at all. It'll be nice to have a woman's presence in the house again, even if just for a night. The comment, innocent as it was, sent an unexpected warmth through Jessie. She stood, brushing down her skirts. I should help with the clearing up. Nonsense, you're our guest, not a hand. He rose to stand beside her. "But I won't stop you if you're determined. My mother raised me never to argue with a lady who's made up her mind." Jessie laughed, the sound bright in the evening air. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." Something flickered in Matthew's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition, but he merely offered his arm. "Come, I'll introduce you to Mrs. Abernathy. She keeps house for us and will show you where everything is." Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a cheerful widow in her 60s who clearly doted on both Matthew and Michael. She showed Jessie to a simple but comfortable guest room with obvious pride. "Been a long while since we had a lady staying in the house," she confided, turning down the bed. "Does my heart good to see the place coming back to life a bit. The master, he keeps to himself too much since Miss Emma passed." "They were very happy together?" Jessie asked, unable to curb her curiosity. Mrs. Abernathy's face softened with memory. "Like two halves of a whole they were." He was different then, laughed more, spoke more. The war had left its mark on him, but she helped heal those wounds. The older woman sighed. "When the fever took her, something in him went with her. If it weren't for young Michael, I sometimes think he might have followed her." Jessie's heart ached at the thought of such grief. "Michael is a remarkable boy." "That he is," Mrs. Abernathy agreed. "Growing up too fast, if you ask me, trying to be the man of the house alongside his pa." She patted the bed. "There now, everything's ready. Wash basin's full, towels there on the stand. Breakfast is at 6, but don't worry if you sleep past, I'll keep something warm for you." After the housekeeper left, Jessie moved to the window, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. The last of the guests were departing, lanterns bobbing like fireflies as wagons and riders made their way down the drive. She could see Matthew standing in the yard, Michael at his side, bidding farewell to their neighbors. Father and son, shoulder to shoulder, their silhouettes nearly matching save for the difference in height. There was something deeply moving about the picture. They made two people bound by blood and loss, carrying on together. Jessie turned away from the window, a curious ache in her chest. She'd come to Leadville seeking refuge, not entanglement. Yet something about the Tuckers, their quiet dignity, their resilience called to her in a way she hadn't expected. Sleep came easily in the quiet of the ranch house, the mountain air cool through the open window. Jessie dreamed of music and laughter, of dancing beneath cottonwood trees with a tall figure whose face remained in shadow. She woke to sunlight and the distant sound of cattle. For a moment she lay disoriented, the unfamiliar ceiling above her a puzzle until memory returned. Tucker's Rest. The gathering, Matthew's intense gaze as she sang, a soft knock at the door roused her fully. "Miss Wilson," Michael's voice came through the wood. "Mrs. Abernathy says breakfast is ready whenever you are. Pa's already out checking fences, but he'll be back mid-morning." "Thank you, Michael," she called back. "I'll be down shortly." She dressed quickly in the simple blue day dress she'd packed, braiding her hair in a practical coronet around her head. The house was quiet as she made her way downstairs, but the kitchen bustled with activity. Mrs. Abernathy stood at the stove frying bacon while Michael sat at the large wooden table, books spread before him. "There she is," Mrs. Abernathy beamed. "Sit down, dear, and I'll fetch you some coffee." "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy." "Good morning, Michael." Jessie took a seat across from the boy. "Studying," Michael nodded, looking up from his arithmetic. "Pa says just because it's Sunday doesn't mean the brain should rest. Says the Lord gave us minds to use them." "Your father is right," Jessie agreed. Accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Abernathy pressed into her hands. "Education is important. Pa wanted to be a teacher before the war," Michael said, returning to his sums. "He has lots of books in his study, says reading kept him sane during the fighting." Mrs. Abernathy set a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before Jessie. "Eat up, dear." Mountain air builds an appetite. The food was delicious, simple but perfectly prepared. As she ate, Jessie found herself studying the kitchen, the gleaming copper pots hanging from hooks, the blue checked curtains at the window, the bowl of wildflowers on the sideboard. It was a home, warm and lived in, despite the absence of a woman's touch for so many years. After breakfast, Michael offered to show her around the ranch. Mrs. Abernathy shooed them out with a smile, saying she had baking to do and didn't need youngsters underfoot. The morning was perfect clear skies, a gentle breeze, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. Michael proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out the various buildings and their purposes with the seriousness of a boy who had been raised to understand the workings of a cattle ranch. Pa says ranching is in our blood, he explained as they walked toward the barn. His pa ran cattle in Texas before the war, and his pa before him says a man who knows cattle will never go hungry. Your father seems like a man who values tradition, Jessie observed. Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. He does, but he's not stuck in the past, neither. Always looking for better ways to do things. He's got ideas about breeding stronger stock, improving the bloodlines. Some of the other ranchers think he's got fancy notions, but Pa says a man who doesn't look to the future is doomed to be left behind in it. In the barn, Michael introduced her to his pony, a sturdy paint named Scout, and his father's horse, a magnificent bay stallion called Thunderhead. Pa broke him himself, Michael said with undisguised pride. Nobody else could get near him. Pa says sometimes the wildest spirits just need patience and a gentle hand. From the barn, they wandered to the vegetable garden, where neat rows of early summer produce were beginning to flourish. Mrs. Abernathy tends it mostly, Michael explained, but Ma started it. Pa makes sure we keep it up, says it's a way of keeping her with us. Jessie touched a tomato plant gently. That's a beautiful thought, Miss Wilson. Michael's voice had gone quieter. Can I ask you something? Of course, she replied. He scuffed the toe of his boot in the dirt, suddenly looking very much his 12 years. Do you think people in heaven can see us, know what we're doing? The question caught her off guard, but she recognized the importance of her answer to this motherless boy. I believe they can, she said carefully. I believe the people who love us are never really gone. They live on in our hearts, in our memories, and yes, I think they watch over us. Michael considered this, his young face solemn. Pa says something similar, says Ma's spirit is in the land, in the house, in me. He looked up at her, his blue eyes so like his father's searching hers. Sometimes I talk to her when I'm alone, tell her about my day, things like that. Pa doesn't know. I think that's a wonderful way to keep her close, Jessie said gently. The boy nodded, some decision made in his mind. You sing real pretty, Miss Wilson, like Ma used to. She wasn't a performer like you, but she sang all the time when she was cooking or sewing or just sitting on the porch in the evening. Music has a way of connecting us, Jessie said, touched by his confidence, of expressing feelings we sometimes can't put into words. They continued their tour, reaching a small rise overlooking the ranch house. A single cottonwood tree stood sentinel on the hilltop, its leaves rustling in the breeze. This was Ma's favorite spot, Michael said, his voice hushed as if sharing a secret. She's buried here. Jessie hadn't noticed the small, neat grave marker until he pointed it out, a simple stone with Emma Louise Tucker, beloved wife and mother, carved into its face, along with the dates marking her brief 30 years of life. Pa comes up here to talk to her sometimes, Michael continued. Usually at dusk. Says that's when the veil between worlds is thinnest. I come too, but not when he's here. Think we both need our private time with her. Jessie stood silently beside the boy, honored by the trust he showed in bringing her to this sacred place. After a moment, Michael looked up at her with a small smile. She would have liked you, I think, he said with the simple certainty of youth. Before Jessie could respond, a horseman appeared in the distance, riding toward the ranch house. Even from this far away, she recognized Matthew's straight-backed posture in the saddle. That's Pa coming back, Michael said, shading his eyes. We should head down, he'll be wanting his dinner soon. They made their way back to the house, arriving just as Matthew was dismounting in the yard. He handed the reins to a waiting ranch hand and turned to greet them, his expression lightening at the sight of his son and Jessie together. Well now, he said, removing his hat, have you two been exploring? I've been showing Miss Wilson around, Michael replied. She liked Scout and I showed her the garden and… He hesitated, then finished, and Ma's place. Something flickered in Matthew's eyes, surprise perhaps, or a deeper emotion Jessie couldn't name. Did you now? Michael nodded, suddenly uncertain. Was that all right, Pa? Matthew's expression softened as he looked at his son. Of course it was. Your mother would be pleased to have a visitor, especially one as special as Miss Wilson." The simple compliment warmed Jessie more than it should have. "You have a beautiful ranch, Matthew, and Michael is an excellent guide." "You should be very proud." "I am," he replied, his gaze moving between her and his son with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Every day, Mrs. Abernathy called them in for the midday meal, a simple but hearty affair of cold chicken, bread still warm from the oven, and early garden vegetables. The conversation flowed easily, with Michael eagerly recounting details of their morning exploration that he thought his father might have missed. After the meal, Matthew invited Jessie to join him on the porch while Michael helped Mrs. Abernathy with the dishes a chore. The boy explained with mock solemnity that his father insisted on to build character. The porch wrapped around the front of the house, offering views of the ranch and the mountains beyond. Matthew settled into a wooden rocking chair and gestured for Jessie to take its twin beside him. "This is where I come to think," he said, looking out at his land. "End of the day when the work is done, just me and the mountains and the sky." "It's a beautiful view," Jessie replied softly. "Peaceful," Matthew nodded, rocking slowly. Peace was hard won. After the war, after Emma, he trailed off, then seemed to gather himself. "But that's not conversation for a fine day like today. Tell me, how are you finding Leadville?" Jessie considered the question. "It's different from Denver, rougher in some ways but more honest for it. People don't pretend to be what they're not." "And the Silver Dollar. That can't be an easy place for a lady like yourself." "Mrs. Parker runs a respectable establishment," Jessie said, a touch defensively, "and the work suits me for now. I've always loved singing." Matthew studied her, his blue eyes thoughtful. "For now, you don't plan to stay then?" Jessie looked out at the vista before them, unsure how to answer. "I don't know. I haven't planned much beyond the immediate future lately. Life has a way of appending careful plans." "That it does," he agreed, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. After a moment, he added, "Michael took to you right away. He's not usually so open with strangers, especially women." "He's a special boy," Jessie said sincerely. "Thoughtful, observant. He sees more than most adults give him credit for." "Yes," Matthew's voice held a mixture of pride and concern. "Sometimes I worry he's had to grow up too fast. Losing his mother at such a young age, it changes a child." "Loss changes everyone," Jessie said quietly, "but children are resilient, and he has you and this place and people who love him." Matthew's gaze returned to her, warm and appraising. "You understand a great deal about loss for someone so young." "I've had my share," she admitted. "But haven't we all in one way or another?" They sat in companionable silence for a while, the gentle creaking of the rocking chairs and the distant sounds of the ranch the only interruptions. Jessie found herself unexpectedly content in this moment, this place, with this man whose quiet strength seemed to radiate outward like heat from a stove. "I should be heading back to town soon," she said finally, reluctantly. "Mrs. Parker will be expecting me for this evening's performance." Matthew nodded, his expression regretful. "Of course, I'll have Michael bring the wagon around." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to invite you back, not for a gathering, just to visit, if you'd care to." The invitation caught her off guard. "That's very kind of you." "Kind has nothing to do with it," he replied with unexpected directness. "I've enjoyed your company, Jessie. So has Michael. This house has been too quiet for too long." Before she could respond, Michael appeared on the porch, his expression eager. "Pa, Mrs. Abernathy wants to know if Miss Wilson is taking supper with us before she goes." "I believe Miss Wilson needs to return to town before then," Matthew answered, his eyes still on Jessie's face. "Oh," Michael's disappointment was palpable. "Will you come back, Miss Wilson? Maybe next Sunday, Mrs. Abernathy makes the best fried chicken you ever tasted on Sundays." Jessie looked from father to son, these two people who had somehow worked their way past her carefully constructed defenses in the space of a day. "I'd like that very much, Michael." The boy's face lit up with a smile so genuine it made her heart ache. "I'll go tell Mrs. Abernathy, and then I'll get the wagon ready." After he dashed off, Matthew chuckled softly. "I apologize for my son's forwardness, though I can't say I'm sorry for the result." "No apology necessary," Jessie assured him. I meant what I said. I've enjoyed my time here enormously. Matthew stood, offering his hand to help her up. Then it's settled. Next Sunday I'll send Michael for you, he hesitated, unless you'd allow me to come myself. The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. Jessie placed her hand in his, feeling the strength in his calloused fingers as he helped her to her feet. I would like that, she said softly. Something kindled in his eyes, a warmth, a possibility neither of them was quite ready to name. Until then, Jessie Wilson. The ride back to Leadville was filled with Michael's animated chatter about all the things he wanted to show her on her next visit. Jessie found herself looking forward to it with an eagerness that both surprised and unsettled her. She had come to Colorado to escape, to rebuild, not to form attachments. Yet as Tucker's Rest faded into the distance behind them, she couldn't help glancing back, her heart oddly light despite the complications she sensed on the horizon. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Matthew began appearing at the Silver Dollar several evenings a week, always sitting at the same table near the stage, his attention fixed on Jessie as she sang. He would stay for a drink afterward, their conversations growing longer and more personal with each meeting. True to his word, he came himself to collect her the following Sunday, and the next, and the one after that. Each visit to the ranch deepened the connection between them. Jessie found herself drawn not just to Matthew, but to the life he had built, the solidity of it, the purpose, so different from the uncertain existence she had known with her father. Michael flourished under her attention, opening up more with each visit. He began bringing his schoolbooks to show her his progress, his face alight when she praised his neat handwriting or his grasp of mathematics. Sometimes he would convince her to help with his reading lessons, the three of them taking turns with passages from Treasure Island or Robinson Crusoe. In late July, when the mountains were lush with summer growth and the days stretched long into evening, Matthew invited Jessie for a special Sunday dinner. Michael's birthday, he explained as they rode toward the ranch, side by side on horseback. Jessie had begun taking riding lessons from one of the Silver Dollar's bartenders, a former cavalry man, and Matthew had pronounced her skilled enough to graduate from the wagon. 13. Can hardly believe it myself. He specifically requested your presence. I'm honored, Jessie replied. She had a gift for the boy tucked into her saddlebag, a book of poetry she'd ordered specially from Denver. 13 is an important milestone. Matthew glanced at her, his expression softening in the way it always did when he looked at her lately. It means a great deal to him, having you there. To both of us. The simple statement sent warmth spreading through her chest. These past weeks had changed something fundamental between them, shifted their relationship into territory neither had explicitly acknowledged. The birthday celebration was a small affair, just Matthew, Michael, Jessie, Mrs. Abernathy, and the ranch foreman and his wife. Michael received his gifts with genuine gratitude: a new saddle from his father, a hand-knitted sweater from Mrs. Abernathy, a carved wooden box from the foreman. When he opened Jessie's book, his face lit up with pleasure. Byron, Wordsworth, Keats, he read from the table of contents. Pa, look, just like the ones in your study. Matthew examined the volume, his fingers tracing the gilded spine. A fine gift indeed. He met Jessie's eyes over his son's head. You remembered, she had. Weeks ago, Matthew had mentioned his love of the English poets, how they had sustained him during the dark years after the war. The fact that he noticed her attention to this detail made her heart beat faster. After dinner, as twilight settled over the ranch, Mrs. Abernathy produced a fiddle and pressed it into Matthew's hands. Play something for the birthday boy, she urged. It's been too long since music filled this house. Matthew hesitated, then nodded. If Miss Wilson will sing. I'd be delighted, Jessie agreed. They moved to the parlor, a room Jessie had seen before but never used. A piano stood in one corner, its surface dusty from disuse. Emma's, Matthew explained, following her gaze. Haven't had the heart to have it tuned since she passed. He positioned himself near the window, raising the fiddle to his shoulder with the ease of long practice. The melody he began was sweet and melancholy, Barbara Allen. the ballad of love and regret she had sung to him that first night at the Silver Dollar. Jessie joined in, her voice twining with the fiddle's plaintive notes. As they performed, she watched Michael's face, saw the way he leaned forward in his chair, utterly absorbed. When the final notes faded, the boy's eyes were suspiciously bright. "One more," he requested. "Something happy for a birthday?" Matthew smiled at his son. "What would you suggest?" "The Yellow Rose of Texas," Michael suggested. "Ma used to like that one." A shadow crossed Matthew's face, but he nodded, adjusting his grip on the fiddle. As they launched into the livelier tune, Jessie saw Mrs. Abernathy tap her foot in time, saw the foreman's wife lean against her husband's shoulder with a smile. When they finished, Michael was the first to applaud. "That was wonderful. Miss Wilson, you sound just like—" He stopped abruptly, glancing at his father with a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "Like what, Michael?" Jessie asked gently. The boy squared his shoulders. "You laugh like Mama used to," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "When you sing, when you're happy, it's the same." A hush fell over the room. Jessie felt heat rush to her cheeks, unsure how to respond to such a candid observation. Matthew had gone very still, the fiddle forgotten in his hands. His eyes moved from his son to Jessie, something unreadable in their blue depths. "Mrs. Abernathy broke the silence with a clap of her hands. "Time for cake, I think. Michael, come help me serve." As the others filed toward the kitchen, Matthew remained where he was, his gaze still fixed on Jessie. She met his eyes steadily, though her heart raced in her chest. "I'm sorry if Michael's comment made you uncomfortable," he said finally, setting the fiddle aside. "He speaks his mind sometimes without considering the impact." "There's no need to apologize," Jessie assured him. "It was a sweet thing to say." Matthew moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the fine lines at their corners. "It was also true," he said quietly. "I've noticed it myself. The way you laugh, the joy in it. Emma had that same quality, a happiness that drew people to her." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Drew me to her." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. "Matthew," Jessie began, uncertain what she wanted to say. He shook his head slightly. "No need to respond, not yet, just think on it, on us." "On what might be possible?" Before she could reply, Michael called from the kitchen, his voice bright with birthday excitement. "Pa, Miss Wilson, the cake's ready." Matthew offered his arm, a gesture both courtly and intimate. "Shall we?" Jessie placed her hand on his sleeve, acutely aware of the warmth of him beneath the fabric, of the significance of this moment. "Yes," she said softly. "We shall." That night, after cake and more music and laughter that filled the old ranch house with life, Matthew drove Jessie back to Leadville. The road was silver in the moonlight, the mountains dark shadows against the star-strewn sky. They rode mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, filled with unspoken understanding. When they reached the Silver Dollar, the saloon was still busy, light and music spilling from its windows onto the dusty street. Matthew helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming today. For making Michael's birthday special. Thank you for including me," she replied. "It was a lovely day." He studied her face in the mingled light of the moon and the saloon's lanterns. "Jessie," he said, his voice low, "I know you came to Leadville running from something. We all have pasts we'd rather leave behind, but I hope—" He paused, searching for words. "I hope you might consider finding a future here with us." The directness of his statement took her breath away. "Matthew, I don't answer now," he interrupted gently. "Just think on it." "I'll come by tomorrow evening." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that had become familiar and dear to her over these past weeks, then climbed back into the wagon. Jessie watched him drive away, her heart full of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Inside, the Silver Dollar was crowded and smoky, the usual Sunday night clientele seeking one last bit of entertainment before the working week began. Mrs. Parker intercepted Jessie near the stairs to the rooms above. "There you are, girl. Got time for a set. The miners are asking for you." Jessie nodded, moving toward the small dressing room off the main floor to change into one of her performance gowns. As she sang that night, Her mind kept returning to Michael's words, to Matthew's steady gaze, to the possibility of belonging somewhere to someone after so long adrift. The following evening, Jessie found herself watching the door, anticipating Matthew's arrival with a nervousness she hadn't felt since her first performance. When he finally appeared, hat in hand, she faltered briefly in the middle of Annie Laurie before recovering, finishing the song with her eyes locked on his across the crowded room. As she stepped down from the stage for her break, Mrs. Parker caught her arm. "Go on," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "Take your time. I'll have Jim play something instrumental until you're back." Jessie made her way to Matthew's table, aware of curious glances from the other patrons. Her relationship with the rancher had become something of a topic of interest in Leadville over the past weeks. "Evening, Jessie," Matthew said, rising to pull out her chair. "You sound even more beautiful than usual tonight." "Thank you," she replied, settling across from him. "How was your day?" "Long," he admitted with a small smile. "Michael talked of nothing but yesterday until I sent him out to help with the afternoon chores. Mrs. Abernathy says he slept with that book of poems under his pillow." Warmth spread through Jessie's chest at the image. "He's a special boy." "Yes." Matthew's expression grew more serious. "Jessie, about what I said last night, Matthew," she interrupted, having rehearsed this moment in her mind all day. "Before you continue, there's something you should know about why I came to Leadville." He waited, his blue eyes steady on hers. "My father was a gambler," she began, the words coming more easily than she'd expected. "A dreamer. Always chasing the next big strike, the next game, the next opportunity. He loved me in his way, but he was reckless. When he died, I discovered he'd mortgaged everything we had and more. The creditors took it all." She paused, drawing a steadying breath. "I left Denver one step ahead of men who wanted to claim me as payment for his debts." Matthew's expression darkened. "These men, are they still looking for you?" Jessie shook her head. "I don't think so. It's been months, and I changed my name slightly. It was Wilkins, not Wilson, but the fear remains." She met his eyes directly. "You should know what you're inviting into your life, into Michael's life." "What I'm inviting," Matthew said quietly, reaching across the table to take her hand, "is a woman of courage and integrity. A woman who has faced hardship and emerged stronger for it." His fingers tightened around hers. "A woman I have come to care for deeply." The simple declaration made her heart race. "Matthew, let me finish," he said gently. "I know what it is to run from the past, Jessie. After the war, I was a different man than the one who'd left for the fighting. The things I'd seen done, they haunted me, still do sometimes. Emma helped me find my way back to myself. When she died, I thought that part of my life was over." He paused, his gaze intense. "And then you sang Barbara Allen in a smoky saloon, and something woke up in me that I thought was gone forever." Jessie felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I never expected this," she admitted. "When I came to Leadville, I was only thinking of survival." "And now," he asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand, "now I find myself thinking of a future," she replied softly, "a real one." The smile that spread across his face transformed him, erasing years of solitude and grief. "Jessie Wilson," he said, his voice low but firm, "I am asking you to consider a life with me, with us. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. I am a patient man." Before she could respond, a commotion at the bar drew their attention. Two miners were arguing, their voices rising above the general din. Mrs. Parker moved toward them, her expression stern, but one of the men shoved past her, heading directly for Jessie's table. "Well, if it ain't the songbird," he slurred, bracing his hands on their table. "Prettier than a picture, ain't she, boys?" He peered at Jessie, his alcohol-fogged eyes suddenly sharpening. "Say, don't I know you from somewhere? Denver, maybe." Fear shot through Jessie like ice water. She recognized him now, one of her father's gambling companions, a man who had looked at her with too much interest even when her father was alive. Matthew stood slowly, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. "You're interrupting a private conversation, friend. Why don't you head back to the bar?" The miner straightened, belligerence in every line of his body. "Ain't talking to you, cowboy. Talking to the lady, or ain't she a lady?" he leered at Jessie. Wilkins, right. Your pa owed me money when he died. Figured maybe you might want to settle his debts, pretty thing like you. Matthew moved with a speed that belied his calm demeanor. In one fluid motion, he had the miner by the collar, pushing him back from the table. You've had too much to drink, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Time for you to leave. The miner struggled in his grip. Get your hands off me. You don't know who you're messing with, neither do you, Matthew replied evenly. He marched the protesting miner toward the door, the crowd parting before them. Outside, he released the man with a firm shove that sent him stumbling into the street. Don't come back until you're sober and civilized. By the time Matthew returned to the table, Jessie had composed herself, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Are you all right? He asked, concern evident in his face. She nodded, though in truth she felt shaken to her core. He was one of my father's associates. I didn't think anyone from Denver would recognize me here. Matthew retook his seat, reaching for her hands across the table. Listen to me, Jessie. No one from your past is going to harm you, not while I'm here. The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty, nearly undid her. I can't ask you to take on my troubles. You didn't ask, I'm offering. His blue eyes held hers. That's what people do when they care for each other. They stand together. Mrs. Parker appeared at their table, her expression concerned. Everything all right, dear? That rough customer didn't upset you too badly, I hope. Jessie managed to smile. I'm fine, Mrs. Parker. Mr. Tucker handled it admirably. So I saw. The older woman's gaze moved between them, assessing. Jim can play a while longer if you two need some air. Matthew nodded gratefully. Thank you, madam. We'll just step outside for a moment. The night air was cool and clean after the smoky interior of the saloon. Harrison Avenue stretched before them, Leadville's main thoroughfare quiet at this hour except for the occasional passerby and the lights spilling from other establishments. I'm sorry about that, Jessie said as they stood in the shadow of the Silver Dollar's awning. It seems my past isn't as far behind me as I'd hoped. Matthew stood close beside her, a solid presence in the darkness. Jessie, look at me. She turned to face him, finding his expression serious but gentle in the lamplight. Everyone has a past, he said quietly. What matters is the future we choose to build. I want to build mine with you if you'll have me. The directness of his declaration took her breath away. Matthew, are you certain? We've only known each other a short time and I come with complications. A smile touched his lips. I knew Emma was the one for me the first time I saw her, standing in her father's garden with the sunset in her hair. Sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind hasn't caught up to yet. He took her hands in his. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for you to consider the possibility. Of us? Jessie looked up into his face, this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed it so completely. I don't need time to consider, she said softly. My heart recognized you too, I think. I was just afraid to listen to it. The hope that bloomed in his eyes was almost too much to bear. And now I'm listening, she replied, and it's telling me that some chances are worth taking. Matthew's hands tightened on hers. I should do this properly, court you the way a lady deserves. But life out here has a way of cutting through the formalities. He released one of her hands to touch her cheek gently. May I kiss you, Jessie Wilson? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, she whispered. He leaned down, his lips meeting hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. It was a gentle kiss, respectful but with an undercurrent of something deeper, a promise of passion held in check. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. I've been wanting to do that since you sang Barbara Allen, he admitted, his voice husky. Jessie laughed softly, the sound bubbling up from a place of joy she'd thought long buried. I think I've been waiting for you to do it just as long. Matthew's expression grew more serious. Jessie, I want you to know I'm not asking you to replace Emma. What we had was precious to me and always will be, but the heart has a capacity for love that doesn't diminish with use, it grows. I would never ask you to forget her, Jessie said gently. She's part of who you are, part of Michael. I would honor her memory, not erase it. Relief and gratitude washed across his features. You are a remarkable woman, Jessie Wilson. The door of the Silver Dollar opened, spilling light and noise into the quiet street. Mrs. Parker stood framed in the doorway, her expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but your next set's due, Jessie. The crowd's getting restless." Matthew nodded understanding. "Of course, we'll be right in." As Mrs. Parker disappeared back inside, he turned to Jessie with a smile. "Duty calls, but this conversation isn't finished." "No," she agreed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "It's just beginning." When Jessie stepped back onto the stage, something had changed. The audience noticed it immediately, a new radiance in her face, a deeper emotion in her voice as she sang. Her eyes sought Matthew's frequently, drawing strength and joy from his steady presence. Later that night, after the last customer had departed and the barkeep was extinguishing the lamps, Matthew stood with Jessie at the foot of the stairs that led to her room. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said, his voice low for her ears alone. "If that suits you." "It does," she replied with a smile. He kissed her once more, briefly but with no less feeling than before, then departed with a tip of his hat. Jessie climbed the stairs to her small room, her heart too full for sleep despite the lateness of the hour. She stood at her window, watching as Matthew's figure disappeared down the moonlit street, and allowed herself to imagine a future she'd never dared dream of before. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of emotion and change. Matthew came to the Silver Dollar every evening, sometimes with Michael, sometimes alone. He began escorting Jessie on walks through Leadville during the day, introducing her to shopkeepers and neighbors with a pride that made her blush. At the end of August, on a perfect late summer evening, Matthew invited Jessie for a ride. They followed a trail that wound up through pine forests above Leadville, emerging finally onto a ridge that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. "This is beautiful," Jessie breathed, dismounting to stand at the edge of the overlook. Matthew joined her, taking her hand in his. "Emma and I used to ride up here when we were first married," he said quietly. She said it made her feel closer to heaven. Jessie squeezed his fingers, touched that he would share this special place with her. "Thank you for bringing me here." He turned to face her, his expression serious but warm. "Jessie, these past weeks have been the happiest I've known in 5 years. I wake up each morning eager for the day because I know I'll see you. Michael talks about you constantly. Mrs. Abernathy has started asking when you're going to move into the ranch house permanently." Jessie's heart skipped a beat. "Has she now?" "She has." Matthew's smile was tender. "And I find myself wondering the same thing." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had this made in Denver, had to guess at the size, but the jeweler said it can be adjusted if needed." He opened the box to reveal a ring, a single, perfect sapphire set in gold, flanked by tiny diamonds. "It reminded me of your eyes," he said softly, "the way they catch the light when you laugh." Jessie's breath caught in her throat. "Matthew," he went down on one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Jessie Wilson, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but out here life moves differently. We recognize what matters and hold on to it with both hands." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I love you. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision, but they were tears of joy, of wonder at how completely her life had transformed in such a short time. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Matthew Tucker, I will marry you." His face lit with such happiness that it nearly broke her heart. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her, and rose to pull her into his arms. His kiss was different this time, filled with promise and a carefully restrained passion that made her cling to him, breathless and dizzy. "When?" he asked when they finally drew apart. "When will you make me the happiest man in Colorado?" "Soon," she replied, laughing through her tears. "As soon as can be arranged. I don't want to wait." "Neither do I," he admitted. "Though we should probably consult Michael. He has a vested interest in this decision." Jessie's expression softened at the mention of the boy who had wormed his way into her heart so completely. "Do you think he'll be pleased?" Matthew's smile was confident. "I know he will. He's been dropping hints about how nice it would be to have you at the ranch all the time. Last week he asked me if I thought you'd want to live in his mother's room or if we should build on an addition." "Oh, Matthew," Jessie leaned her head against his chest, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance in the boy's question. I would never presume to replace Emma in his heart. No one is asking you to, Matthew assured her, stroking her hair. But you've created your own place there, one that's just as real and important. He tilted her chin up to look into her eyes. Michael was the one who first noticed, the way you laugh like she used to. He said it made the house feel like home again. The simple statement brought fresh tears to her eyes. Then we must tell him first before anyone else. We will, Matthew promised. Tomorrow I'll come fetch you in the morning and we'll ride out to the ranch together. They lingered on the ridge until sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson, making plans, sharing hopes, sealing their commitment with kisses that grew increasingly difficult to end. Finally, as twilight gathered, they rode back to Leadville, Jessie's heart so full she thought it might burst from her chest. Mrs. Parker was the first to notice the ring when they returned to the Silver Dollar. Her shrewd eyes widened, then crinkled with genuine pleasure. "Well now," she said, taking Jessie's hand to examine the sapphire, "isn't that a pretty thing, and about time if you ask me?" Matthew's smile was both proud and slightly abashed. "You don't think we're rushing things, Mrs. Parker?" The older woman snorted inelegantly. "At my age, young man, nothing seems rushed except the passing of time. When you know," she patted Jessie's hand. "You'll be giving notice, I expect." "Yes," Jessie admitted. "Though I'd be happy to keep singing until you find a replacement." "Nonsense," Mrs. Parker declared. "A rancher's wife has better things to do than entertain miners and travelers." Her expression softened. "Though I'll miss that voice of yours, girl, brought class to this old place." Later, after Matthew had departed with a lingering kiss and a promise to return in the morning, Jessie sat at her small dressing table, admiring the way the lamplight caught in the depths of the sapphire. She could hardly believe how completely her life had changed in the span of a few short months. From desperate flight to newfound love, from uncertainty to a future filled with promise, she thought of Michael, of the boy's solemn face lighting up when he saw her, of his candid observation that had started them all on this path. "You laugh like Mama used to." Such a simple statement, yet it had opened a door she hadn't even known existed. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, the kind of perfect late summer day that seems to hold all of nature in a state of golden suspension. Matthew arrived early, his face alight with barely contained joy as he helped her into the wagon. "Michael doesn't suspect a thing," he told her as they set out from Leadville. "Mrs. Abernathy's keeping him busy with chores until we arrive." Jessie smoothed her skirts nervously. "I hope he'll be truly happy about this. It's such a big change for him." Matthew covered her hand with his, warm and reassuring. "Trust me, this is what he's been hoping for, even if he hasn't said it in so many words." The ride to Tucker's Rest seemed shorter than usual, the familiar landmarks passing in a blur of anticipation. As they approached the ranch house, Jessie could see Michael in the yard, splitting kindling under Mrs. Abernathy's watchful eye. The boy looked up at the sound of the wagon, his face breaking into a grin when he saw Jessie. He set down his axe and hurried toward them, only slowing to a more dignified walk when Mrs. Abernathy called after him about running with sharp tools. "Miss Wilson, Pa didn't say you were coming today." His delight was evident in every line of his young face. "Well, son," Matthew said as he helped Jessie down from the wagon, "Miss Wilson and I have something important to discuss with you, something we wanted to tell you first before anyone else." Michael's gaze moved between them, curiosity and a dawning understanding in his blue eyes. "What is it?" Matthew placed his arm around Jessie's shoulders, drawing her close to his side. "I've asked Miss Wilson to marry me, and she's done me the very great honor of accepting." "If that meets with your approval, of course." For a moment, the boy stood perfectly still, processing this information. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine it made Jessie's heart swell. "Really, you're going to be my new mother." Jessie stepped forward, taking Michael's hands in hers. "I would never presume to replace your mother, Michael," she said gently. "But I would be honored to be your friend, your family, and yes, a mother to you in whatever way you'll allow." To her surprise, the boy flung his arms around her waist, burying his face against her shoulder. "I hoped it would happen," he mumbled against her dress. Ever since that first day when I heard you laugh, it was like Mama was telling me it was okay to be happy again, all of us." Tears pricked at Jessie's eyes as she held the boy close, meeting Matthew's gaze over his head. The love she saw there for his son, for her, for the family they were creating was almost too much to bear. "When?" Michael asked, pulling back to look up at them both. "When will you get married?" "Can it be soon, before school starts again?" Matthew laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "That's awfully quick, son. There are arrangements to be made." "Actually," Jessie said with a smile, "I was thinking the same thing. Why wait? We could have a simple ceremony right here with just the people who matter most to us." The joy that lit Matthew's face was answer enough. 2 weeks, he suggested. "That would give us time to send for the Reverend from Fairplay, prepare the house." 2 weeks, Jessie agreed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "September 15th. That's Grandma Tucker's birthday," Michael observed. "Pa says she was the best woman he ever knew, except for Mama." "Then it's perfect," Jessie declared. A way to honor the past while embracing the future. Matthew pulled both of them into his arms, his son and his bride-to-be, and Jessie felt something settle in her soul, a sense of rightness, of belonging, that she had searched for all her life without knowing it. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation and joy. Mrs. Parker insisted on gifting Jessie a proper wedding gown, ordering it specially from Denver with an urgency that cost extra but ensured its arrival in time. Mrs. Abernathy, with Michael as her eager assistant, set about preparing the ranch house, polishing every surface until it gleamed, baking enough to feed an army. Matthew rode into every neighboring ranch and homestead personally, extending invitations to the small but significant ceremony. Jessie wrote to her few remaining friends in Denver, not expecting them to make the journey but wanting them to know of her happiness. The day before the wedding, a letter arrived from Denver that made Jessie's hands tremble as she recognized the handwriting. It was from Eleanor Stanton, her father's sister, who had been traveling in Europe when Wilson died and his debts came due. "My dearest Jessie," the letter began, "I have only just learned of your father's passing and the circumstances that followed. I am heartbroken that you faced such trials alone. Please know that had I been aware, I would have come immediately to your aid. I have settled all outstanding debts in his name, so you need fear the creditors no longer. I will be arriving in Leadville on the 14th and hope very much to attend your wedding, if you will permit me. Your loving Aunt Eleanor." Jessie sat on her bed at the Silver Dollar, tears streaming down her face as relief washed through her. The shadow that had hung over her since her flight from Denver was lifted at last. When Matthew arrived that evening, she showed him the letter with hands that still trembled slightly. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "The past can't follow me anymore." Matthew drew her into his arms, his embrace solid and reassuring. "Then we truly can begin anew," he murmured against her hair, "together without fear." Aunt Eleanor arrived as promised, a handsome woman in her 50s with the same chestnut hair Jessie had inherited, now streaked with elegant silver. Her warm embrace and immediate acceptance of Matthew and Michael completed Jessie's sense that all the broken pieces of her life were finally coming together. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the mountains standing sentinel against a sky of deepest blue. Jessie dressed in the room that would soon be hers, the room Matthew had shared with Emma, now refreshed with new curtains and bedding but still holding the warmth of family history in its walls. Eleanor helped her with the gown, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and wrists. "You look radiant," her aunt said, adjusting the small wreath of wildflowers in Jessie's hair. "Your father would be so proud." "Do you think so?" Jessie asked softly. Eleanor's smile was gentle. "Despite his faults, and they were many, he loved you more than anything in this world. All he ever wanted was your happiness." She squeezed Jessie's hands. "And you have found it, haven't you, with your rancher and his son?" "I have," Jessie confirmed, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "More than I ever dreamed possible." A soft knock at the door heralded Michael, dressed in his Sunday best, his hair slicked down in a vain attempt to tame its cowlicks. "Mrs. Abernathy says everything's ready," he announced, his eyes widening as he took in Jessie's appearance. "Gosh, Miss Wilson, I mean, Jessie, you look like an angel." Jessie laughed, the sound bright with happiness. "Thank you, Michael, that's quite a compliment." Pa's waiting on the porch, the boy continued. "He's wearing his good suit and looking mighty nervous." A mischievous grin lit his face. "Told him there's nothing to worry about, but he's pacing something fierce." "Then we shouldn't keep him waiting," Jessie replied, taking Michael's offered arm with a solemn formality that made him stand taller. Together they descended the stairs, Alina following behind. The main room of the ranch house had been transformed, furniture moved aside, flowers adorning every surface, sunshine streaming through windows polished to brilliance. The Reverend stood near the stone fireplace, and gathered around him were the people who had become Jessie's new family, the ranch hands and their families. Mrs. Abernathy beaming with pride, Mrs. Parker dabbing suspiciously at her eyes, neighbors whose names and stories Jessie was still learning. And there, waiting by the Reverend, stood Matthew. His face as she entered was a study in wonder, in love so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. Beside him stood his foreman as best man, but Matthew seemed to see no one but her as she crossed the room on Michael's arm. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the Reverend asked as they reached the fireplace. "I do," Michael replied, his young voice steady and proud. "Her son-to-be." A murmur of approval and touched laughter rippled through the gathering. Matthew's eyes glistened suspiciously as he took Jessie's hand from his son's, drawing her to stand beside him. The ceremony was simple but profound, the ancient words of commitment taking on new meaning as they echoed in the home that would now be hers. When Matthew slipped a gold band onto her finger to join the sapphire engagement ring, his hands were steady, but his voice broke slightly on the words. "With this ring, I thee wed." "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared at last. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Matthew's kiss was tender, respectful of their audience but filled with promise for later, when they would be alone. As they turned to face their guests, now family in truth as well as feeling, Michael stepped forward to embrace them both, completing the circle. The celebration that followed was joyous and unhurried, stretching from the afternoon into evening. There was dancing in the yard, Mrs. Abernathy's fiddle joined by instruments from the neighboring ranches. There was food in abundance and laughter, and the kind of genuine good wishes that come only from people who understand the value of happiness found after sorrow. As twilight softened the edges of the mountains, Matthew found Jessie sitting on the porch steps, watching Michael teach one of the younger ranch children how to do a Virginia reel. "Happy, Mrs. Tucker?" he asked, settling beside her. Her name now sent a thrill through her. "More than I can express," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Good." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." Jessie turned her face up to his, marveling at how this man, this place, had become home so quickly. "I was lost when I came to Leadville," she said softly. "Running from the past, afraid of the future, I never imagined I would find you, a family." Matthew's arms encircled her, drawing her close against the cooling evening air. "Sometimes the things we never imagined turn out to be exactly what we needed all along." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jessie found herself thinking of all the twists of fate that had led her to this moment: her father's death, her flight to Leadville, that first night at the Silver Dollar when a solemn-faced rancher had watched her sing from the shadows. And most of all, a boy's simple observation: "You laugh like Mama used to." Michael approached them, his face flushed from dancing, his eyes bright with happiness. "Pa, everyone's asking for Jessie to sing, just one song before folks start heading home." Matthew looked at her questioningly. "What do you say, Mrs. Tucker? One song to end the perfect day." Jessie rose, smoothing her wedding gown. "I'd be honored." "What should I sing?" "Beautiful Dreamer," Michael suggested. "It was the first one you sang at the Silver Dollar, Pa told me." Matthew's smile held a hint of embarrassment at being caught remembering such a detail. "The boy's right. That was the moment I started falling in love with you, though I didn't know it yet." Inside, the guests gathered around as Jessie took her place by the piano. One of the neighboring ranchers' wives took the bench, fingers poised over the keys. As the familiar notes began, Jessie's clear soprano filled the room, the beloved melody carrying all the joy and hope in her heart. She sang looking at Matthew and Michael, her new family, her eyes conveying what words alone could not. When the final notes faded, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Matthew came forward to claim her, his arms strong around her waist. "Thank you," he murmured for her ears alone. "For your voice, for your heart, for choosing us." Later, much later, after the guests had departed and Michael had been tucked into bed with promises that yes, Jessie would still be there in the morning, and every morning after, husband and wife stood on the porch of Tucker's Rest. The night was clear, the stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "Happy, Mrs. Tucker?" Matthew asked again, his arms encircling her from behind. Jessie leaned back against his solid warmth, watching as a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the heavens. "Perfectly," she replied. "This is where I belong, where I was always meant to be." As they turned to enter their home now, truly and completely, Jessie couldn't help but laugh, the sound bright with all the joy her heart contained. And in that laughter was a promise, a continuity, a reminder that life renews itself in unexpected ways, that love creates its own patterns of connection, weaving together past and present, memory and hope, in a tapestry too beautiful for words. "You laugh like Mama used to," Michael had told her, and in those simple words had been an invitation and a recognition. Now, as Matthew led her up the stairs to begin their life together, Jessie knew she would spend the rest of her days honoring that observation, bringing laughter and music and love into this house that had known too much silence. Outside, the mountains stood guard as they had for millennia, while within the walls of Tucker's Rest, a new family slept, their dreams as bright as the stars above, their future as vast as the Colorado sky.